What you're about to hear is no coincidence. Something beyond your logic brought you here. And when you finish this video, you'll realize it all had a purpose. There are stories that don't begin with you, but somehow they end in you. Wounds you never lived through, yet you carry them. Silent loyalties to ancient pains, to patterns that echo through your family, generation after generation, like a whisper no one can silence. Then, one day, you arrive, and without fully understanding why, you begin to feel a deep urge inside you, a calling to break that cycle, not to reject your origin, but to honor it in a new way, through healing. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And there are family fates that you can no longer carry without losing yourself in the process. It's not because you are stronger, it's because you are more awake. It's not that it doesn't hurt, it hurts deeply, but your soul chose to awaken. What weighs on you now doesn't always belong to you. What aches inside you didn't necessarily start with you, but you feel it, because you are the one who has come to close the cycle. The first sign is a deep discomfort with what your family has always considered normal. It's not judgment, it's awareness. It's as if your eyes begin to see something that others continue to accept without question. The emotional silence, the constant sacrifice, the guilt passed down like an heirloom, the love that hurts but is never spoken about. And even if you can't explain it clearly, something inside you whispers, "This can't go on." You start to realize that this discomfort doesn't stem from outside criticism, but from an inner sensitivity that refuses to be numbed any longer. You've tried to adapt. You've stayed quiet. You've repeated certain gestures, phrases, behaviors, just to keep the peace. But something inside you breaks a little more every time you betray your truth in the name of loyalty to your family system. It's as though a part of you knows that continuing these patterns only delays the healing for everyone. Because what you heal doesn't just heal for you. It heals backwards for those who couldn't, and forward for those who are yet to come. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, but he also spoke of the family unconscious, that invisible field where secrets are buried, where fears, losses, and injustices remain unnamed, yet still pulse through the bloodline. And you, by noticing it, by feeling it, you're not exaggerating, you're waking up. Those who come to break cycles do not do so out of blame, but out of courage. And you, by feeling that discomfort in what once felt like normality, have already taken the first step. You are saying, "Enough," from a sacred place. You're beginning to listen to a voice that doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the soul that has decided not to repeat. You also begin to notice that this discomfort isn't shallow or fleeting. It's a deep calling, a vibration that comes alive in moments that others overlook, a phrase spoken with resignation, a scene that replays across generations, an emotion passed down as if it were part of your family name, and you, without knowing why, cannot look away. This is not about feeling superior. In fact, many times you felt like the outsider, like you didn't belong. You've tried to follow the rules of your family system. You've done what was expected, but something in you dims every time you pretend it doesn't affect you. Because you weren't born to adapt to inherited pain. You were born to transform it. And even when it hurts, maybe especially when it hurts, it's a sign that your soul chose a mission far greater than you imagined. Not to fix others, but to break the pattern from within. Not to destroy the tree, but to prune it with intention, allowing something new to grow through you. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, but who looks inside awakens." And by looking honestly at the deepest connections you have, those that shaped you, you are awakening to a truth others could not bear to face. You're beginning to see that what once looked like love was actually fear, that what passed for strength was often just unhealed hardness, that what was labeled sacrifice was actually self-abandonment, passed down again and again. But you can no longer follow that script, not because you're rebellious, but because you're conscious. And consciousness doesn't scream, it burns. It burns quietly inside you until you choose to act from it, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because you know that the pain of awakening is more honest than the comfort of repeating. And so, here you are, starting to write something new. Even if you don't yet have the words, even if the page still feels blank, even if your voice trembles, you're doing something sacred. You're beginning again, not from rejection, but from remembrance. You are the end of the wound and the beginning of the healing. The second sign is when you find yourself deeply moved by stories you never lived, narratives that somehow feel carved into your skin as if they've always belonged to you. Someone mentions a long-ago loss, a distant absence, a quiet surrender, and suddenly a wave of emotion rises within you. You can't explain where it comes from, but it feels ancient, as if your soul recognizes a pain that wasn't yours to begin with, yet you carry it as though it were. Carl Jung understood that the psyche doesn't have the sharp boundaries we imagine. It stretches beyond the self and intertwines with something much older, much deeper. When you feel what no one else has spoken, you are touching the echo of an ancestral wound that you were born to heal. You begin to realize that those feelings are not a figment of your imagination or the result of being overly sensitive. They are living memories, emotional residues embedded in your dreams, your silences, and your body. Sometimes you experience sadness without a clear cause, as if a part of you is mourning something that never happened to you personally, but deeply affected someone who came before you. That uncried grief, passed from generation to generation, has now reached you. And it's not a coincidence. What you're receiving is not just a family name, it's an energetic legacy. You didn't inherit only features or traditions or the stories people are willing to tell. You also inherited the silence, the unresolved sorrow, the emotional exile, and your soul, more awake and more present than perhaps it's ever been, has begun to make space for those suppressed truths to be expressed and finally transformed. Sometimes it's in a phrase you hear or a childhood memory that unexpectedly surfaces. There's a sting in your chest, not nostalgia, but recognition. Your body becomes a bridge between what was denied and what can now be liberated. And even if others don't understand why you're so affected, even if they think you're overreacting, deep down, you know the truth. You know you're not feeling only your own emotions. You're feeling for all those who weren't allowed to feel. Jung described the soul as a field where all the parts that have been rejected, individually and collectively, seek to express themselves. You are that part of the family system that can no longer look away. You are the awareness returning to what others have spent lifetimes avoiding. And so, yes, at times, it feels like too much. Not because you're broken, but because you are receiving so much. Because ancient emotions are echoing through your being. Emotions that can no longer be silenced. And even though it hurts, there is something in you that refuses to shut down, because you know that this pain is the doorway to a truth that must be spoken at last. With your sensitivity, you are cleansing what no one else could put into words. And you begin to notice that this connection to what you didn't live is not merely emotional, it's vibrational. You step into certain rooms, you hear certain stories, or even just glance at an old photograph, and something awakens in you, a languageless echo, a subtle trembling in your soul, a quiet certainty that something unresolved happened there. You may not understand all the details. You might never fully grasp the entire story, but you still feel ready to carry that invisible inheritance, not out of martyrdom, not for attention, but because you simply cannot live anesthetized. There's a part of you that refuses to ignore the frequencies that feel out of place. Many times, you've felt the weight of something that doesn't quite belong to your personal history, and yet you cannot let it go as if it means nothing. Because you know that this wasn't placed in you by mistake. It was placed in you because you were chosen to bring it to a close. And that doesn't make you a savior. It makes you a channel. The passage through which what has been stuck for generations finally begins to move. The body where emotional knots begin to loosen. The soul that reopens a door that had been locked shut through years of pain, shame, or fear. And though this task is quiet, often lonely, it is also profoundly sacred. Jung believed that the unconscious of a family always seeks to restore balance through one of its members, not to punish, but to heal, to reorder the system through awareness. And you, with your sensitivity, your discomfort, and your often misunderstood emotions, are that member. The one who comes to witness what no one else could see, to feel what generations have buried. Every time you allow an ancient emotion to rise, every time you honor a pain without repeating it, every time you break a destructive pattern without carrying guilt, you are healing, not just for yourself. You are healing backward. You are liberating forward. And even if that transformation is invisible to the world around you, it changes everything. There is a third sign, one that many overlook, but that you have carried like a quiet weight for most of your life. It's the subtle, often painful realization that you have always been the different one in your family, the one whose thoughts don't quite align, the one whose presence, even when unintentional, stirs discomfort, the one who sees what others have normalized and dares to ask, why? You've never fully felt like you belonged, not because you were disconnected, but because you were attuned to a different frequency of awareness. You operate from a higher state of consciousness, one that your family system has yet to understand, let alone support. It's not a matter of superiority, but of alignment. Carl Jung spoke about this. He understood that the individual who brings light to the family tree is often met with rejection from the very roots they are trying to heal. And yet, by staying true to your inner truth, even when it alienates you, you are honoring something far greater than mere approval. You are honoring your purpose. You also know deep within you that this feeling of not fitting in is not recent. It has been there for as long as you can remember. Since childhood, you've noticed the difference. You felt more deeply, sensed more intensely, and reacted to life in ways that others didn't understand. What was trivial to them was monumental to you. What they accepted without question, you could never digest without inquiry. And somewhere along the way, you were made to feel like that sensitivity was a flaw, like your depth was a burden, like your intensity was a problem to be fixed. You were told You were too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too complicated, and for a long time, you believed them. So, you tried to conform. You trimmed parts of yourself. You molded your edges. You practiced the art of silence and suppression, all in the name of belonging. But each time you did, something inside you dimmed. Something sacred was silenced. Because that difference, the very thing you were trying to hide, wasn't a mistake. It was your signal. A silent, divine reminder that you did not come here to continue the same story. You came to rewrite it at its roots. And rewriting doesn't mean you're here to impose. It doesn't mean shouting to be heard or forcing change. It means existing, fully and unapologetically, without abandoning yourself. It means holding your vision steady, even when it makes others uncomfortable, even when it creates distance, even when you're met with suspicion or patronizing smiles. Because what you carry isn't just a different perspective, it's a new frequency altogether, a vibration that challenges, without trying, everything that generations before you were taught to ignore or suppress. Jung described this as the process of individuation, the courageous journey of becoming who you truly are, even if it means defying the inherited expectations of your family, your culture, your ancestry. And that's precisely the road you're on. You are walking a path not mapped out for you. You are choosing to pause where others rush, to speak where others stay silent, to act based on what you feel rather than what you're told is right. That's not rebellion, it's revelation, and that painful feeling of not fitting in. It has become your compass. It has shown you the way. You now understand it, not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that you came here not to save anyone, not to prove anything, but to remember and to remind others, through your presence, that there is another way to live, to feel, to relate. And yes, sometimes that role weighs heavily. Sometimes it isolates you, but you no longer view it as a curse. You see it as a calling. Because someone had to interrupt the cycle. Someone had to pause the narrative that was looping endlessly, and that someone is you. You've probably also noticed that the more authentic you become, the more clearly you see the dissonance around you. There are moments when simply being in the room shifts the energy. Certain conversations become strained, as if your presence alone holds up a mirror no one asked for. You're not trying to change anyone, you're just being yourself. But your vibration has changed, and it cannot be masked. You don't have to say a word. Your energy speaks for you, and it's not always welcomed with open arms. Sometimes it manifests as subtle exclusion, as unexplained distance, as awkward silences that hang heavy in the air. Not because you're wrong, but because you're bringing light to places that have been kept in shadow for generations. And light, as beautiful as it is, can be deeply unsettling at first. It disrupts, it reveals, and not everyone is ready for that. But you are no longer willing to dim your light just to make others comfortable. You've already paid the price of pretending, of staying quiet, of squeezing yourself into molds that never fit. And now, you've decided your soul will not bear that cost anymore. Because the price of belonging at the expense of yourself is far too steep. And you learned this not through theory, but through experience, through emptiness that couldn't be filled, through inner fractures, through those nights when everything seemed fine on the outside, but something within you screamed. Jung said, healing begins the moment one chooses to carry their own destiny instead of living out the collective script. That is exactly what you're doing. You've stopped living just to keep the peace. You've started living to stay true to your essence, because you now understand that this inner fidelity doesn't only liberate you, it liberates every soul who will walk the path after you. Not fitting in no longer wounds you, it affirms you. It tells you that your path is not one of repetition, but of creation. Your energy is not here to fit the mold. It's here to gently dissolve it. Not through destruction, but through love. Not through noise, but through the silent coherence of someone who can no longer pretend to be what they are not. You are no longer hiding. You are no longer apologizing. You are simply being. And in doing so, you are transforming the world, one truth at a time. The fourth sign is when you're deeply moved by the realization that your decisions affect not only your life, but also those who came before you and those who will come after. You no longer choose from the ego, you choose from awareness, because you understand that every time you break a pattern, you're not being selfish, you're freeing an entire lineage from repetition. Carl Jung believed that individual healing is actually collective healing, and by acting from your truth, you're writing a new future for your bloodline. You've also started to feel both the weight and the honor of that responsibility, because your choices aren't just about personal comfort anymore. You're making them knowing that each conscious step untangles old knots, that every boundary you set with love marks a limit that has never existed before, that when you choose silence over shouting, truth over the mask, the soul over the role, you're opening sacred space that never existed, and even when it's hard, you do it anyway. Even if no one notices, you keep going. Because you're not doing it for applause, you do it because it feels meaningful. Something ancient within you, older than this life, knows you came to close a cycle. Not from rejection, but from elevation. Not to punish those who came before, but to free what they couldn't release when they had the chance. Carl Jung said, "One of the most powerful ways to heal the past is to live authentically in the present." And you've begun to embody that truth. You're no longer driven by the fear of breaking tradition. You're moved by the vision of what can be created when tradition is transformed with awareness. You sense that each bond, each decision, each deep conversation you dare to have isn't just personal growth. It's part of a collective memory being rewritten through you. Because change doesn't always come through grand gestures. Sometimes it comes as a firm no, as an unflinching gaze, as a presence that no longer pretends. And within that small gesture, you're making history. Not because you're perfect, but because you are present. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you've stopped running. And by not running, you're holding space that was once filled with fear, silence, or cycles. That space is now filled with your awareness. You've also noticed that every time you choose differently, something realigns inside you, and also within your family's story. It's not just a personal feeling. It's as if a thread in the invisible fabric of your lineage shifts, as if by saying, "This ends with me," you set free someone long ago who never had the voice to say it. And even if it's never spoken out loud, even if no one names it, you know. Something in the entire system changes when you change with awareness. You've started to notice that your journey, no matter how personal it seems, is connected to a wider web. Your healing doesn't end with you. When you dare to break a bond based on manipulation, when you drop an imposed role, when you choose peace over automatic conflict, you're honoring those who didn't have the strength, the permission, or the freedom to do it before. Carl Jung said, that what's left unresolved emotionally in one generation is passed down as fate in the next, and you, by healing what was ignored at the root, are breaking the chain, not with anger, but with awareness. Because what's not transformed is repeated, and you can no longer allow cycles that silence your soul. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You don't need to convince or justify. Your integrity speaks louder than words, and even if your path is misunderstood, you feel peace, because you know that the peace you build today will be inherited by your children or the children of life itself. Every time you choose from your soul and not from your wounds, you become a link of light, turning a painful cycle into a new beginning. And that beginning starts with you. The fifth sign. You begin to feel a deep urge to cleanse, not just your physical space, but also your relationships, your thoughts, your emotions. It's as if something within you is demanding lightness, not as an escape, but as a path to clarity. You simply can't continue carrying what was never yours, or upholding patterns that no longer reflect your truth. Carl Jung understood that what accumulates in the unconscious eventually reveals itself in the external world. And now you are starting to empty yourself so that you can inhabit your inner world from a different place. You begin to realize this impulse to cleanse is not shallow. It's not about improving your life as an external goal. It's about creating space for what your soul is finally ready to receive. You feel that there are things, people, and thoughts that no longer resonate with your current vibration. Not because they're bad, but because they no longer represent you. Not because you're running away, but because you're now choosing from a different center, one that is more loyal, more peaceful, more profound. Just like you clean your home, your wardrobe, or your routines, you also start to examine the loyalties you've been maintaining out of habit. You begin to wonder if you're carrying guilt that was never yours, if you're holding on to relationships that survive only because you fear conflict, if you're still obeying ideas that no longer align with your deepest truth. And you realize that yes, much of what weighs you down was never truly yours. Carl Jung once said that those who look inward awaken, and you've started to look with more honesty, with more calm, with less judgment. And from that place, you've begun to see clearly that the noise, the chaos, the tension, often they don't come from what you're living now, but from what you're still dragging behind. And you can't, and don't want to, keep dragging what you never chose. So you start to let go, sometimes with tenderness, other times with pain, but always with truth. You release inherited patterns, habits that disconnect you, roles that limit you, because you know you cannot step into your purpose if you're full of invisible agreements with a past that has already run its course. And each thing you cleanse, silently and consciously, is an act of love. Love for yourself. Love for those who will come after you. Love for those who came before you and couldn't do what you're now allowing yourself to do. You're emptying yourself to remember who you are, and that is a vital part of closure. You also begin to notice that every time you cleanse something external, something internal becomes lighter. It's not a coincidence. Your surroundings begin to reflect your energy. You can no longer tolerate constant noise or shallow conversations or the excuses you keep making to avoid facing what you already know doesn't align with you, because what you used to ignore has now become too obvious. And that act of cleansing is not always visible. Sometimes it's about stopping the justification of your own pain. Other times, it's saying no without guilt, or simply allowing yourself to rest without feeling the need to compensate with productivity. You're slowly dismantling the old mandates you inherited, the pressure, the self-denial, the forced silence. And in doing so, you're writing a new way of being in the world. Carl Jung spoke about integrating the unconscious, not to reject it, but to free it. And as you begin to face with compassion what you once avoided, you're integrating, not because everything is solved, but because you're no longer breaking yourself in order to hold it all together. You no longer need to be right or prove anything. You just need to feel at peace with what you're leaving behind. Each object you release, each bond you reframe, each emotion you let go without explanation. It's an act of ancestral liberation. Because cycles don't close when everything is perfectly clear. They close when you decide you no longer want to live from the wound. They close when you give yourself permission to choose from your soul, not your inheritance. And you, even if you sometimes forget it, are already choosing differently. The sixth sign appears when, even after a difficult path, something inside you still chooses to remain open. You haven't shut down, even though you've had every reason to. You haven't hardened your soul, even though the pain was real. And that is the clearest sign that you're here to close a cycle, not by repeating the emotional shutdown you inherited, but by staying open. Carl Jung understood that true transformation begins when we stop acting from the wound and start living from awareness. And you, even in the middle of exhaustion, have kept choosing to heal. You also know that staying open hasn't been a comfortable choice. It's been a brave one, because closing off would have been easier, and it would have made sense. After so many disappointments, after so many broken bonds, after giving more than you received over and over again, it would have been natural to build a shield. But you didn't. You chose to keep feeling, to keep trusting, to keep healing. And while that sometimes hurts more, it also makes you free, because your soul didn't come here to replay the script of hardening in order to survive. It came to rewrite life from a different place, from conscious openness, from vulnerability turned into strength, from the wound transformed into a bridge. You came to close a cycle, yes, but not through emotional shutdown, through sacred closure. Jung used to say, "What doesn't get transformed gets repeated." And you chose to transform, not with words, but with silent acts, choosing a different word in the middle of conflict, upholding your self-love when no one else validates it, walking away without resentment, looking back without bitterness. All of that, even if unseen, even if unnamed, is active healing. It is embodied evolution. Every time you choose to stay open, even while afraid, you are breaking the pattern. You're freeing those who had to shut down in order to survive. You're showing your lineage, without saying a word, that there's another way to walk through life. That love doesn't have to hurt. That relationships don't have to be born out of emptiness. That it is possible to live without repeating what destroys. And now, that possibility lives in you. Because you chose the hardest path, yes, but also the brightest one. The path of the soul that doesn't shut down, even when trembling. The path of the heart that, even scarred, keeps beating with presence. You've also begun to sense that your openness is no longer naivety, it's mastery. Because now, you don't open yourself to be accepted. You open because you've learned that closing your heart doesn't protect you. It just separates you from your truth. You've crossed the threshold where sensitivity stops being weakness and becomes a path. A path you now walk by choice, knowing that staying available from the soul heals something in the world. Your ability to keep loving, even when misunderstood. even when judged, even when hurt, is an ancestral force. It is the part of your lineage that came to end the cycle of constant defense, of hardness as a shield, of silence as the only response. And that is revolution. A revolution that doesn't need noise, just presence. Carl Jung understood that true transformation doesn't happen by avoiding pain, but by walking through it without losing yourself. And you've done that. You've felt deeply without giving up. You've cried without dimming your light. You've been alone, but never disconnected from who you really are. That space, that choice, is where the cycle came to its end. Not because it burned out, but because you chose another way. And that choice is what changes everything. Because when one person in a system stays open, real, and available from the soul, the entire story begins to shift. What once felt eternal begins to dissolve. What once seemed inevitable stops repeating. Because you, with every act of presence, with every conscious gesture, with every boundary set, without rage, are writing a different ending. And that ending, even if no one sees it, is sacred, because it doesn't close from fear. It closes from love. Closing ancestral cycles isn't rejecting your roots. It's giving them back the freedom they never had. It's looking back without copying, walking forward without dragging the past, and inhabiting the present from a level of awareness that isn't inherited. It's conquered. And you're conquering it. Carl Jung believed that the soul awakens when someone dares to be different, not out of rebellion, but out of truth. And that truth is now alive within you. Because even if it wasn't a mental decision, your soul said, "This ends with me." And that doesn't separate you from your lineage. It honors it. Because you're not closing this cycle to break away. You're closing it to free, to make room for something fairer, healthier, and more real. If this video stirred something deep within you, if each word echoed wounds you've carried but never named, it's because you are that point of transformation. And if you want to keep walking toward your truth, grounded in your roots but free from repeating the wound, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Here, we don't just reflect. Here, the soul recognizes itself. Here, every word exists in service of your awakening. There are moments in life when the soul crosses a threshold, an invisible point of no return, where nothing remains the same. It's not a loud or dramatic shift, but a silent, irreversible transformation that changes everything. This crossing marks the beginning of a new path, one that is rich with awareness and a profound awakening. To recognize that you've crossed that threshold is an act of courage and truth, because it means accepting that your life has changed forever. The first sign appears when you realize you can no longer live the way you used to. The old habits, beliefs, and patterns that once held you together begin to lose their meaning. As Carl Jung would say, this moment is part of the process of individuation. The moment when the soul begins to separate from the shadows of the past and emerge into its true essence. You no longer feel satisfied with superficial answers or surface-level experiences. That internal discomfort, that feeling that something is missing, is the first real indication that you've crossed the threshold. It's a deep inner calling that resonates in every fiber of your being. You start to feel disillusioned with what once gave you comfort, as if the structures that once provided safety now feel like cages. The spiritual threshold you've crossed begins to push you toward a life of deeper meaning and authenticity, even if it means walking into the unknown. This transformation isn't just mental, it's vibrational. Your energy no longer aligns with the things that used to feel normal. A space opens up within you, inviting you to let go of what no longer serves your growth and expansion. Carl Jung emphasized that separating from the shadow is essential to the birth of the true self. And although that process can be painful, it's also liberating and necessary. You begin to notice that what used to matter now holds less weight, and new values start rising from within you. Values that are more aligned with your soul's essence. It often feels like a symbolic death and rebirth. Something old must die, so that something new and more authentic can be born. Once you've crossed this irreversible threshold, every step forward becomes an opportunity to grow, to learn, to evolve. There's no turning back, because your soul has awakened to a new level of consciousness. The search for truth is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity. It becomes the compass that guides your every decision and movement. This inability to return to who you once were becomes a kind of anchor, keeping you grounded in your transformation. Each day, the old structures of identity begin to crumble, and in their place, a more authentic and aligned self begins to emerge. Yes, it's unsettling to break away from the familiar, but that's the sacred cost of attaining inner freedom. This shift penetrates not only your thoughts, but your body, your heart, and your spirit. Your body senses the change as a different vibration, a higher frequency that starts rejecting anything that no longer aligns with your evolution. Your heart begins to open to more meaningful experiences, and your spirit awakens to a wisdom that transcends logic and language. This integration is the true marker of a crossed spiritual threshold. What makes this crossing irreversible is that your soul has expanded, and that expansion cannot be undone. Processes have been activated within you that work on both conscious and unconscious levels, forever altering the way you perceive yourself and the world. Even when challenges arise, you're no longer willing to look away from the inner calling that guides your path. Your choices now reflect a deep alignment with values that were once buried or suppressed. Life begins to reveal itself with greater clarity, and although the road ahead is uncertain, there's a quiet confidence inside you that sustains each step. There's a growing certainty that this journey is not only real, it's necessary. The threshold you crossed is a portal into a fuller, more meaningful life. This awakening transforms everything, including your relationships and surroundings. What once resonated begins to fade, and in its place, new, more authentic connections emerge. Your energy changes. It becomes more refined, more radiant, and it attracts people and experiences that mirror this new version of you. The threshold is not just an internal experience. It begins to reshape your outer reality. What follows is a continuous invitation to dive deeper into self-awareness, to keep peeling away layers, and to discover the essential truth that has always lived inside you. It becomes a journey of continuous integration, where both shadow and light coexist in harmony. This balance allows your soul to shine in its full brilliance. You begin living a life where every moment is intentional, where presence is sacred, and where your connection to universal wisdom is renewed. You've crossed a point of no return, and in that surrender lies the beauty and power of your spiritual awakening. That irreversible crossing marks the beginning of a deep metamorphosis, one that reshapes every cell in your being. You no longer cling to fleeting certainties or the false securities that once defined your path. Instead, you embrace uncertainty as an open door to expansion and genuine growth. This awakening drives you to live with a new intensity, where even the most difficult experiences are seen as sacred opportunities to evolve. The awareness that comes after crossing that threshold is not static. It flows, it breathes, it constantly invites renewal. The old wounds become quiet teachers. The shadows you once feared now, at a depth you never knew you were capable of. Carl Jung reminds us that individuation is a never-ending journey, a constant movement toward wholeness and authenticity. This irreversible transformation also connects you to broader dimensions of existence. You begin to sense a resonance with universal energies, a deep intuitive understanding that your life is part of something much greater than yourself. This connection strengthens your sense of purpose. It influences your decisions in a way that reflects the purest truth of your soul. In this new state, patience and self-compassion become essential. You understand that your journey is deeply personal and that every step, no matter how unsure or lonely it may feel, is valuable. Trust in the process sustains you. You know the threshold was never a barrier. It was a doorway to a more conscious life. Yes, this point of no return is, in fact, a new beginning. A beginning where authenticity, inner wisdom, and light unite to guide every movement, every thought, every breath. You've entered a sacred space where transformation is no longer optional. It's inevitable. And in that inevitability lies your true freedom. The second sign is when you begin to feel a much deeper connection with your intuition, and with it, a growing clarity in the decisions you make. It's not that the external world has become less chaotic, but rather, your inner world has begun to radiate a wisdom that surpasses confusion. You no longer doubt yourself as much as you once did, because a quiet, unwavering voice within you starts to guide your choices with conviction, like the echo of an ancient truth rising from the core of your being. Carl Jung understood this as a crucial part of the individuation process, that sacred journey toward becoming your true, whole self. It's when the unconscious begins to reveal its wisdom in your waking life, gently pointing you toward alignment and meaning. You feel this guidance not in grand revelations, but in the subtleties, in the calm certainty that washes over you before making a difficult decision, in the way your body relaxes when you choose what feels right, even if it defies logic. This is a sign that you've crossed a spiritual threshold and that your life is beginning to align more deeply with your essence and your higher purpose. The clarity you now experience within is not a random occurrence. It is the product of a profound awakening that bridges your conscious mind with the rich, intuitive depths of your unconscious. This inner voice, though quiet and often subtle, acts as a beacon. It shines through the fog of uncertainty and lights up the path that's meant for you. You no longer get lost in mental spirals or paralyzed by fear. Instead, you move forward with a grounded confidence that only comes from being in tune with your true self. This intuitive awakening enables you to notice signs and synchronicities that previously went unnoticed. Those moments when the universe seems to whisper, "You're on the right track." Life begins to speak to you in a clearer, more direct language, and you, in turn, learn to listen, not with your intellect, but with your heart wide open. You start trusting that each step you take is guided by a higher intelligence that sees farther than you can. Carl Jung described this as the emergence of archetypal wisdom, the timeless knowledge stored within the collective unconscious. This wisdom becomes accessible to those who dare to listen, to those who are willing to pause and truly connect with what lies beneath the surface. The trust that arises from this connection also begins to transform the way you face challenges and make decisions. You stop chasing answers in the outside world or relying solely on cold logic. Instead, you begin to act from a space of internal certainty and intuitive alignment. This inner shift elevates your frequency and propels you forward toward the destiny your soul came here to fulfill. In this process, intuition becomes your steady and loyal companion. It becomes a compass that guides you through the storms, a reminder of who you truly are, even when everything around you feels uncertain. The clarity that emerges from this signal is not just comforting. It's a confirmation that the spiritual threshold you've crossed is real, and that it's leading you toward higher levels of consciousness and personal fulfillment. This awakening of intuition doesn't just change how you perceive the world. It also redefines your relationship with yourself and with life itself. You begin to feel a deeper connection forming between your mind, your heart, and your soul. These aspects of yourself, once fragmented or at odds, now move together in a harmonious flow that guides every decision and every action with a clarity that once seemed out of reach. That inner voice you now hear more frequently and trust more fully becomes a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between your conscious awareness and the vast landscape of your unconscious mind. Jung referred to this bridge as the meeting with archetypes, those universal energies that offer wisdom, strength, and guidance to your personal journey. They are not abstract ideas. They are living symbols that awaken within you, offering direction and resonance as you navigate your path. As you open yourself to this inner flow, you begin to receive messages that don't just inform you, they inspire and empower you. This renewed intuition shields you from paths that are not aligned with your truth, and it gently steers you toward those that nourish your spirit. This inner guidance is a clear manifestation that the threshold you crossed is deep and transformative, and that you are now moving toward a life where your inner and outer worlds are increasingly in harmony. In this state of being, your self-trust grows naturally, and with it, your ability to live with authenticity and full presence. You no longer seek validation from others to confirm your choices. You stand in the knowing that each step is part of a larger divine design, one that your soul not only understands, but embraces fully. This awakening is a call to listen more deeply, to trust more profoundly, and to allow that inner voice to lead you toward the fulfillment of your highest purpose. It confirms that the spiritual threshold you've crossed has opened the path to a life that is more aligned, more conscious, and vibrating at a higher frequency than ever before. The third sign appears when you begin to feel a profound sense of detachment from situations, people, or beliefs that once held you tightly. You no longer feel the urgent need to control or possess anything. Instead, you allow life to unfold naturally, trusting its rhythm and wisdom. Carl Jung noted that conscious detachment is a clear sign of spiritual maturity and the crossing of a vital threshold, as it frees you from the burdens that once held back the soul's expansion. This sign reveals that you've started to live from a lighter, freer vibration, one that aligns deeply with your inner truth. The sensation of deep detachment is not abandonment. It is a conscious act of release that redefines how you relate to the world and to yourself. You no longer feel trapped by the compulsion to control every part of your life or to cling to people, ideas, or circumstances that no longer resonate with your essence. Instead, you let everything flow in its own time and space, trusting that the universe moves in your favor, even through uncertainty. This detachment is not indifference, but rather a mature, conscious form of love that recognizes the impermanence of all things. Carl Jung taught that by releasing attachment, we make room for genuine inner freedom, allowing energy to expand and consciousness to rise. This liberation is a powerful sign that you've crossed an irreversible spiritual threshold. Living from this space of detachment allows you to observe life with greater clarity and serenity, no longer trapped by intense emotions or rigid expectations. The lightness that comes from letting go connects you with a higher vibration, a frequency where the soul is free to dance in wholeness and joy. This new state also reshapes your relationships and life experiences. You begin to attract more authentic connections and circumstances that reflect your elevated frequency. The energy you emit is no longer tinted by fear or anxiety, but infused with deep trust in the natural flow of life. Thus, conscious detachment becomes a clear sign that you've crossed that spiritual threshold, a decisive step into a life more true, more free, and in harmony with your highest purpose. It becomes a sacred gift you give yourself, to walk into the future your soul longs for, with power and lightness. In the act of letting go, you discover the freedom that is born when you release the need for control and place your trust fully in life's unfolding, guided by a wisdom that knows no error. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It is a gradual journey where you learn to discern what truly deserves your energy and what must be left behind. Carl Jung reminds us that this conscious detachment is a sign of profound spiritual growth, an invitation to live with an open mind and a light heart. It's the ability to flow with natural cycles, understanding that every ending creates the space for a new beginning. Practicing this detachment, you become less reactive and more observant. Anxiety, fear, and frustration slowly give way to a calm inner presence that holds your spirit. This peace no longer depends on external conditions. It's rooted in an inner vibration that reflects your connection to your essential truth. This new state of freedom also impacts your surroundings, drawing in people and experiences that resonate with your renewed energy. The quality of your relationships improves, and your daily life takes on a deeper and more enriching meaning. In this way, conscious detachment not only transforms your inner world, but also redefines the reality you live in. In essence, crossing this threshold invites you to live with authenticity, presence, and trust, leaving behind the chains that once restricted your growth. It's the turning point toward a fulfilled life, where freedom and love weave together to support your spiritual path with strength and clarity. By releasing the need to control or cling, you make space for new energies, opportunities, and people to enter, those aligned with your most authentic self. This act is a powerful declaration of trust in divine flow, a recognition that everything arrives at the perfect time for your evolution. The transformation that comes with this detachment doesn't just affect your external world, it reshapes your relationship with yourself. You no longer judge yourself for what was or what you once thought you needed. Instead, you accept yourself fully in each phase of your journey, with compassion and wisdom. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of this acceptance in the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole. This new way of being, free from rigid attachments, allows you to live with deeper presence and mindful attention. Each moment becomes precious, experienced through authenticity and openness. The energy you radiate becomes magnetic and coherent, drawing toward you experiences that mirror your inner growth and nourish your ongoing evolution. The fourth sign appears when your perception of time and reality begins to shift in profound ways. You no longer see life as a straight line or a sequence of isolated events, but rather as a living tapestry where past, present, and future are intricately woven into an eternal now. This expansion of awareness is a clear indication that you've crossed an irreversible spiritual threshold. Carl Jung referred to this transformation as part of the luminous experience, where perception opens up to wider and more meaningful dimensions. It means your soul has begun to inhabit a deeper reality, full of symbols and invisible connections that once went unnoticed. This transformation in how you perceive time and reality is like waking up in a new universe where everything is interconnected, where each moment reflects infinity and every experience holds layered meaning. Time no longer feels like a limiting chain, but a dynamic flow in which past, present, and future are entangled in an eternal dance that sustains your very being. This expansion of consciousness allows you to see life from a broader, deeper perspective, where ordinary events reveal themselves as sacred symbols speaking directly to your soul. It's an awakening to the hidden magic in the everyday, to the presence of an invisible order that quietly guides and holds everything in place. Jung described this encounter with the luminous as a sacred presence that touches the depths of the psyche and existence. This new way of perceiving reality also transforms how you relate to time. You no longer feel the pressure of imposed deadlines or the urge to rush through processes that require their own sacred rhythm. Instead, you begin to align with the natural cycles of your soul, honoring the sacred time each phase of your life needs to fully unfold. This is a sign that you've crossed a threshold into a more conscious life, where every moment is lived with intention and full presence. Your soul starts to recognize the unseen threads that connect you with all that exists, and this awareness guides you toward a more integrated and harmonious existence. The intertwining of time and reality you now experience invites you to trust life's unfolding, to accept that every experience has a purpose and a rightful place in the sacred fabric of your path. Within this expanded awareness, you discover a deep freedom that transcends human limitations and connects you with the eternal essence of who you are. This expansion of consciousness that transforms your sense of time and reality isn't just a fleeting experience. It's a profound change that reshapes how you inhabit each moment. Now, every instant feels infused with meaning, as if the universe itself is speaking through signs and symbols only your soul can understand. This sensitivity to the invisible and the sacred links you with an ancient wisdom that surpasses the boundaries of logical thought. As you begin to perceive life as a living, interconnected tapestry, you start recognizing patterns and cycles that once escaped your notice. You understand that every challenge, encounter, and change is part of a greater design, a cosmic symphony where everything holds a place and a purpose. This understanding gives rise to an inner peace that doesn't depend on external conditions, but on a deep trust in the natural order of things. Jung taught that this experience of the luminous is essential for individuation because it allows the soul to open up to higher dimensions of meaning and being. In this expanded state, the human being can transcend fragmentation and find unity with the whole. Duality weakens here, and consciousness rises toward full integration. This shift also transforms your relationship with the ordinary. What once seemed mundane or insignificant now appears as a doorway to the transcendent. Daily life becomes a sacred ground for learning and growth, where every action and thought carries a real, vibrational impact. Living in this space of sacred time and expanded reality allows you to flow with greater grace and wisdom, responding to life from a place of deep presence and authenticity. You've crossed a threshold that invites you to live not just with the mind, but with a heart and soul fully awake, embracing the wonder and mystery of existence in every moment. This new way of inhabiting time and reality generates a vibrational shift that can be felt in every cell of your being. You don't just perceive life more deeply. Your entire presence becomes more authentic and powerful. Expanded consciousness frees you from the illusion of rigid control and invites you to dance with the natural flow of existence, in perfect harmony with the sacred rhythm of the universe. This elevated vibration draws experiences and people that resonate with your new frequency, creating a virtuous cycle of growth and expansion. In this state, intuition sharpens, synchronicities multiply, and your connection to inner wisdom deepens, nourishing your spiritual path with clarity and purpose. Carl Jung taught that crossing this threshold is essential for the full integration of the self, because only by recognizing and living in this expanded reality can we reach the wholeness and authenticity our soul longs for. Perceiving time as a living fabric opens the door to a life rich with meaning, where each moment becomes an opportunity to align with your deepest truth. This transformation also changes how you relate to your past and future. You stop being tied to limiting memories or expectations and learn to inhabit the present in its fullness. This expanded present becomes the sacred space where your soul can unfold completely, without distractions or resistance. Thus, crossing this threshold places you in a vibrational state where life is experienced as a sacred mystery, an eternal dance of light and shadow, inviting constant growth and awakening. In this new awareness, your soul finds the freedom to express itself in its full magnificence and beauty. And the fifth sign, though not the least important, is when you begin to notice a profound transformation in your sense of purpose and mission. You're no longer driven by the need to meet external expectations or conform to imposed rules. Instead, you align yourself with an inner calling that guides you toward your true essence. Carl Jung understood that crossing a spiritual threshold of no return means connecting with that inner voice that fuels the process of individuation and personal fulfillment. This sign reveals that you've entered a path of authenticity and a deep commitment to your spiritual evolution, where every step feels meaningful and truthful. That shift in your purpose arises from a deep connection with the core of your being, where external demands lose their grip and the true call of your soul becomes clear and unmistakable. You no longer act out of obligation to someone else's norms or to seek others' approval. You act to honor the genuine essence that drives you from within. This internal calling becomes a force that motivates you to live with coherence, integrity, and passion. Every choice and every action becomes a reflection of that sacred voice, leading you toward the fulfillment of your personal and spiritual mission. Carl Jung described this awakening as the process of individuation, where the human being becomes who they are truly meant to be, transcending conditioning and limitations. Once aligned with this purpose, you begin to feel a clarity and peace that once seemed unattainable. The path may come with challenges, but the inner certainty sustains each step, giving you the strength to move forward with confidence and resilience. This transformation not only benefits you, it radiates outward, inspiring and uplifting those around you. This sign is a powerful indication that you've crossed an irreversible spiritual threshold, a point where authenticity and devotion to your evolution become the driving force of your life. Living from this space is to embrace the truth of your soul and to walk with purpose toward conscious and complete fulfillment. You no longer seek external validation or let yourself be guided by social expectations. Instead, your focus turns inward, toward honoring that internal call that resonates with the very essence of who you are. This deep connection anchors you in an authentic frequency that energizes your every thought, word, and deed. This alignment with your spiritual mission gives you a sense of wholeness and direction that transcends everyday highs and lows. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the process through which the soul finds its path toward wholeness. And this awakening to purpose is the tangible manifestation of that inner journey. Each step you take from this place of authenticity is an act of conscious creation, a manifestation of your deepest truth. At this stage, decisions are no longer based on fear or uncertainty, but on the trust and clarity that emerge from your center. Life begins to feel more fluid and meaningful, and even if challenges arise, you are certain that each experience brings you closer to the full realization of your essence. This transformation also impacts those around you, creating a resonant effect that inspires others to seek and live from their own purpose. In this way, crossing that irreversible spiritual threshold not only redefines your personal destiny, it contributes to the collective awakening and the weaving of a higher consciousness. In the authenticity of this new purpose, you find the strength to live with integrity, passion, and love, honoring both the light and shadow within you, and walking with courage toward the destiny your soul has always chosen. You've journeyed with me through a deep path, crossing that irreversible spiritual threshold that transforms the very essence of your being. Recognizing these signs is to embrace your truth, to accept the strength that arises from integration, clarity, detachment, expansion, and true purpose. This awakening marks the beginning of a fulfilling life, where every step resonates with the vibration of your soul. Allow yourself to move forward with courage, knowing that you've crossed a point of no return that leads you toward realization and profound authenticity. Your inner light is invincible, and your path is unique and sacred. If this resonated with you, don't leave as if it were just another video. This channel isn't for those just looking for pretty words. It's for those who are ready to bury their weaker, conditioned, and domesticated selves and walk straight into transformation. Subscribe if you're one of those souls. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any messages that can shake you up, awaken you, and free you. And if you want to leave your mark, leave this quote in the comments. Silence is my armor. Consciousness is my sword. That way, I'll know you stayed until the end. That you're not just anyone. That you belong here. There comes a moment along the path when the soul begins to move from a completely different place. It's no longer the mind seeking meaning, nor the body longing for stability. It's something far deeper, a kind of inner fire that ignites without your consent, without your planning or reasoning. It arises spontaneously, without warning, as if something ancient within you has stirred awake after a long, silent slumber. It's not euphoria. It's not motivation. It's a vibration, primal and intense, that shakes you from the inside and changes your entire way of being in the world. This fire does not burn to destroy. It reveals. It doesn't push you forward. It awakens you. And when it begins to activate, everything that is not truly you starts to fall away. You can no longer lie to yourself. You can no longer hide behind roles or routines. Your soul begins to remember why it came here in the first place. And this memory, though it doesn't come with words, feels like a silent urgency that shifts everything. One of the first signs is an inner impulse that you can't quite explain, but you also can't ignore. It doesn't come from logic, nor is it triggered by external goals. It's a call that vibrates straight from your chest, a fire that doesn't ask for permission, that doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It appears suddenly, like something inside you has been waiting for far too long to be lit, and now refuses to remain dormant. This impulse might not always have a clear shape, but it has direction. It moves you toward what is real, toward what feels alive. It pulls you away from whatever dims your light, no matter how familiar or secure. And even if the world doesn't understand why you're changing, you do. You're not searching for something new. You're responding to something ancient that has always been there, waiting. That impulse doesn't come with a map, but it's unmistakable. It may not tell you exactly what to do, but it makes it absolutely clear what you can no longer continue doing. You begin to wake up with a soft but persistent discomfort, a kind of restlessness that no longer disappears with distractions or noise, because it's not about filling voids anymore. It's about acknowledging that something within you is ready to burn, to illuminate, to transform everything from the root. You start to feel that pretending is no longer an option, that remaining in comfort feels like betrayal. You hear a voice deep inside you that can no longer be silenced by logic, that refuses to surrender to excuses, that cannot be numbed by distractions. This voice doesn't scream, it burns. And even if a part of you wishes you could extinguish it to keep fitting in, you know that it's already too late for that. You've crossed an internal threshold. The first spark has been lit. You also begin to notice that what used to satisfy you now frustrates you, not because you've become ungrateful, but because you now see what you couldn't see before, that you were dimming your own light to sustain structures that no longer sustain you. This inner fire doesn't destroy what's outside. It simply makes what isn't aligned unbearable. It pushes you, not as punishment, but out of integrity. And though it might hurt, it also liberates. With every step you take in the direction of truth, the fire grows stronger, not as a punishment, but as guidance. You can no longer fully fall asleep. You can no longer lull your soul with hollow routines, because something within you has been activated, something that doesn't ask for explanation, only space, something that refuses to bargain with fear, only with truth. This fire doesn't arrive to give you certainty. It comes to return you to yourself, to who you were before the masks, before the disguises, before the quiet agreements with the parts of life that were extinguishing your light. It doesn't ask you to know the whole destination, only not to deny yourself the beginning. Because once the fire starts to awaken, there's no turning back. The only way forward is to burn with purpose. You also begin to realize that this impulse doesn't need external validation. You're no longer waiting for approval or hoping someone else will understand what you're feeling, because you know from the deepest place within that this fire doesn't belong to anyone else. It's yours. It was born with you. It has always been there. Only now it's becoming visible, not as a passing emotion, but as a force that permeates everything. Your way of speaking, choosing, living. And that's what truly changes everything. You're not chasing a goal. You're returning to yourself. Every time you listen to that inner impulse and act from that space, the fire becomes more distinct, more present. You start choosing differently, not out of obligation, not from guilt, not from the fear of loss. You choose from a place of expansion, from that sacred space where something inside you ignites, and nothing else makes sense unless it vibrates in resonance with that flame. Even when you feel lost, the fire doesn't leave. It remains, like an ember that refuses to be extinguished, not by doubt, not by fatigue. It stays there, quietly reminding you that something greater awaits, that no matter how many times you disconnect, you can always return. Because this fire isn't snuffed out by time. It only fades when you stop listening. And now, more than ever, you are beginning to listen. And so, almost without realizing it, the fire begins to guide your days, not with grand signs, but with small certainties, the kind you feel in your chest, the kind that don't ask for permission or explanation, the kind that burn but do not destroy, because they're not here to break you, they're here to reveal you. Slowly, you're remembering what your soul has always known, that you came here to light something up, something the world cannot extinguish. The second sign comes when you begin to release what once felt essential, and you do so without pain. People, places, habits, even long-held dreams that no longer resonate with who you are now. These things begin to fall away. There's no bitterness, no dramatic farewell. Instead, a quiet clarity settles within you, as though a wiser part of yourself, existing on a higher plane, is making decisions on your behalf. You might not fully understand the reasons behind this detachment, but you feel deep down that it isn't about loss, it's about cleansing. Your inner fire doesn't just illuminate, it also burns away the things that no longer serve a purpose. And what's most surprising is that in the act of letting go, you don't feel emptiness, you feel light. It's as though everything you release frees up internal space that had been occupied merely out of habit or inertia. It no longer hurts as much to step away from what was once part of your life for years, because now you understand something fundamental. Not everything that has played a role in your story is meant to accompany you in fulfilling your purpose. Certain relationships, beliefs, even parts of your identity, some of them are meant to stay behind as you step forward into a truer version of yourself. You're not running away. You're refining, tuning in more precisely to your essence. You no longer carry the weight of the past out of loyalty. You don't continue to hold on to what dims your light just because a part of you still feels guilty. Your inner fire isn't asking you to destroy anything. It simply makes it impossible to keep ignoring what no longer vibrates with you. And this clarity you feel isn't intellectual. It's energetic. Suddenly, what you used to tolerate with effort becomes suffocating, and instead of forcing yourself to stay, you choose to leave. This fire awakens an intolerance for self-deception. You can no longer justify relationships, paths, or behaviors that don't align with your truth, not out of judgment, but out of integrity. There's no more room to keep convincing yourself you're okay in spaces where you're clearly not. The fire now shines so brightly that it reveals everything you once managed to hide from yourself. And once you see it, you can't go back. What you're letting go of doesn't get erased. You honor it, but you no longer need it. There's no paralyzing nostalgia, only calm gratitude. You recognize that everything that leaves makes room for something more aligned with your present truth. Even if you don't yet have a clear vision of where you're going, your soul already knows. This new space opening up isn't a void, it's a preparation. Each act of letting go, when done from a place of authenticity, strengthens the fire within you. Every time you choose loyalty to your inner voice, that fire grows, because this inner fire isn't sustained by fear or attachment. It's fueled by your choice to prioritize truth over comfort. And slowly, that's exactly what you're doing. You're releasing who you no longer are to make space for who you're about to become. You also begin to notice that every time you release something from the soul, something inside you rearranges. You might not be able to explain it with your mind, but your body feels it. A tension eases, a burden lifts, a new space expands. It's not that letting go has become easy. It's that you can no longer keep holding on without dimming your own light. The fire that's awakening inside you doesn't negotiate with what doesn't resonate. It doesn't tolerate half-truths. It doesn't feed on what once was. It only responds to what's real in the present moment. Even when the goodbye is silent, you know it's final. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become certain. A part of you has already stepped into a new stage. Staying behind would be like trying to breathe in a place where there's no more oxygen. You no longer define yourself by what you leave behind. You define yourself by the profound act of choosing yourself, by the silent decision not to betray yourself, by the invisible gesture of honoring your evolution, even when it hurts. This inner fire is showing you that true loss isn't about losing others, it's about losing yourself. And that's no longer a risk you're willing to take. That's why your choices are different now. Not because you're tougher, but because you're more aware. You no longer fear walking alone if that companionship asks you to shrink. You no longer move from obligation, only from vibration. And if someone or something doesn't respect that new internal level, you let it go, not with resentment, but with reverence. And in that new space, which once felt like loneliness, you now feel presence. Because once you stop filling your life with things that don't vibrate with you, you start to truly feel your own essence. You begin to realize that you don't need to fill every corner. You just need to let your fire inhabit them. And that flame, even if small, is so pure and so true that you could never again settle for being lit by anything less than your own essence. You've stopped fearing the emptiness. Now, you see it as the prelude to purpose, as the sacred space where your soul begins to build what's real. And you, who are letting go without resentment, are showing that your fire is already burning, not out of reaction, but from awareness. Because you know that anyone who lets go from a place of truth is making space for something far greater. You also recognize that this kind of release is unlike anything you've experienced before. You're not closing cycles with anger or running to protect yourself. You're letting go from the deep understanding that your energy no longer fits there, and it doesn't have to. You no longer try to force something that was once beautiful to keep existing, because you've come to understand that true love, genuine connection, and real purpose never ask you to betray yourself in order to stay. You've stopped romanticizing sacrifice. You've learned that your soul did not come here to hold up what's falling apart at the expense of your light. What does it mean to keep holding on to what no longer resonates with you? It's not loyalty, it's abandonment of self. And you've decided to return to yourself, even if it means reconfiguring everything, even if it leaves you for a while in the silence of what hasn't arrived yet. Because that silence no longer scares you. You now see it as fertile ground. Every renunciation, even the painful ones, becomes a declaration. You're declaring that you deserve peace, that your energy is sacred, that your soul is now prioritizing purpose over attachment. And the universe listens to those invisible declarations. It responds when it sees you let go without fear of losing. Because you finally remembered something essential. What's true never leaves. What's true either stays or returns in greater alignment. And in that quiet act of release, you're not just setting others free, you're setting yourself free. You're making space for yourself, for the new that's trying to emerge from the depths of your being, for that voice that no longer has to compete with external noise, for that fire that now burns clearer, cleaner, steadier. You're learning to live without the weight of the unnecessary. You're walking lighter, more authentically, more yourself. And that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It means that finally, pain no longer makes your decisions. The fire does. The truth does. That part of you that doesn't need to speak has already chosen to keep going, burning bright. The third sign is when you begin to act without asking for permission. You no longer need others' validation to move forward. You don't wait for approval from your environment or for someone to tell you it's the right time. You simply do it, not from impulsiveness, but from an inner force that has become impossible to ignore, a silent certainty pushing you forward even when the full path is still unclear. That fire isn't asking for explanations, it's asking to be embodied. This action doesn't come from ego, it comes from the soul. You're not acting to prove anything. You're acting because you can no longer sit still while something inside you begs to be expressed, created, transformed. It's as if a part of you grew tired of waiting for the perfect conditions, as if you finally realized the perfect moment doesn't appear on its own. It's built from presence, from choice, from the kind of fire that won't go out, even when everything around you suggests it's not the time. You're no longer stopped by not yets. You're no longer held back by the doubts of those who don't feel what you feel. You've started honoring your inner impulse as a compass. You've understood that this movement born from within isn't chasing instant results. It's searching for alignment, action that matches your vibration, your transformation, all that you've been holding in out of fear of not being understood. And even though you don't know exactly where each step will lead, you know you can't keep waiting, because now you understand that postponing what's true is a form of self-abandonment. There are ideas, words, creations, and decisions that if they're not born now, will wither inside you. And you, who've been building this fire for so long, are no longer willing to let it die just to keep others comfortable. You start with small but authentic steps. You begin to make decisions that once seemed too big, to take risks that don't come from chaos, but from an inner steadiness that whispers, "This now aligns with who I am." And even if the world doesn't respond right away, you no longer wait for it to. because now you know that acting from your fire is already a response, already an agreement with yourself. This new strength isn't aggressive, it's calm, but unshakable. It doesn't impose, but it doesn't bargain either. It's that voice telling you that if you don't move now, the fire will start turning into ash. And you've decided you're not letting that happen again. Because now you know that acting from your center isn't a luxury, it's a soul necessity. You also realize that this kind of action doesn't require applause. You're not looking for recognition. You don't need anyone to see it or get it. You do it because not doing it would be a quiet betrayal of your soul. Because something in you has changed at the core. You're not moving to become someone. You're moving because you are someone now, and that someone can't stay quiet in spaces where their fire has no room. Every action you take from that inner center reinforces your presence. You don't need big wins or instant results. The fire within isn't rushed, it's committed. And you too are done waiting to feel ready. You've realized no one ever feels ready for what truly matters, that the fire doesn't ask for certainty, it asks for devotion. And if you keep waiting for everything to make sense before moving, you'll slowly burn out without even noticing. But once you surrender to it, something new begins to emerge. Not the full path, but the next step. A small step, so clear you can't ignore it. And when you take it, without needing approval, the fire grows stronger. Because that's what feeds it. Coherence. Not outside conditions, not others' judgments, not results, just the decision to stop postponing yourself. Even if no one else notices, you know what's awakening within. Because every time you act from that fire, everything shifts. Your energy becomes ordered. Your mind quiets. Your emotions align. There's no more inner conflict, because now there's direction. And you don't need to explain it. You feel the deep relief of having chosen yourself. You've started building yourself through movement, discovering who you are, not from waiting, but from action, rooted in your truth. You no longer need someone else to tell you the time is now, because deep down, you already know it is. You also recognize that every time you act from that inner flame, your entire energy field responds. You don't need to understand it to know it. You feel it in your chest expanding, in your breath growing lighter, in the absence of that tension you used to think was normal when doing what was expected instead of what was real. It's not that things become easier. It's that now, the hard things no longer paralyze you. Because moving with fire means moving with roots. And that makes you unstoppable. You no longer do things out of habit. You don't work just to emotionally survive. You don't speak just to fill silence. Now, every gesture carries intention. Every step holds presence. Because when fire moves you, everything you do leaves a deeper mark, even if no one sees it. It doesn't matter if others recognize it, you know it. And that inner knowing is more powerful than any external gaze. You also realize there's no going back. You can't return to acting from disconnection without your soul feeling it like a wound. Because now you understand the difference between acting from impulse and acting from alignment. And that difference is everything. You've learned that when you move from fire, you don't drain, you expand. You don't lose yourself. You sharpen. You don't hesitate. You move forward, even in uncertainty. And something even deeper begins to happen. The fire starts to give you identity. You no longer define yourself by your past, by your roles, or by the story others tell about you. You define yourself by your capacity to move from essence, from that invisible force that no longer fades or gets outsourced, from the coherence between who you are and what you do. That's what purpose is, the exact place where what you feel inside takes shape in the world. And it doesn't matter if no one tells you you're on the right path. You know it, not because of results, but because of resonance. Because when your inner fire becomes direction, no doubt can compete with the certainty of a soul set ablaze. The fourth sign appears when your resistance to change begins to dissolve. You no longer fight what is shifting. You stop clinging to the familiar out of fear. Instead of fearing movement, you begin to welcome it openly. Not because everything is suddenly clear, but because something within you has understood that the new doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to reveal you. Your inner fire has prepared you to walk through transitions without losing yourself. And that's why what once felt like chaos now begins to feel like possibility. You also discover that change no longer sweeps you away like it used to. You don't feel like a victim of movement, but a conscious part of it. You've stopped searching for stability in external things and are now finding it in your own ability to adapt without dimming your light. You no longer cling to what once worked because you know that what served you yesterday could become a cage today. Your fire has taught you how to let go without losing your essence, how to move without falling apart, how to change without betraying yourself. Each transition is no longer a threat, but an activation. You feel something in you grow stronger every time you let go without fear. When you take a new path without having every step figured out, and you don't do it unconsciously, you do it with radical trust in what you're feeling inside. Your fire doesn't need certainty, it needs room to burn. And when change comes, you don't block it, you recognize it as part of the design. You start to notice that the unknown no longer feels so heavy. You used to avoid it, fear it, delay it. And now, even though the vertigo remains, there's also momentum, because your inner fire pushes you not towards safety, but toward truth. And you, who already know what it feels like to betray yourself, choose more firmly what truly represents you. Even if it comes with no guarantees, change no longer feels like loss. It feels like expansion. Even in the midst of disorder, you feel something aligning inside. Even if the world shakes, you're steadier. Not because nothing affects you, but because everything that moves you now makes you stronger. You no longer see movement as a threat, but as part of your awakening, a necessary reconfiguration in someone who has ignited their inner fire and is willing to let that fire transform whatever it touches. You don't need to control every step anymore. You trust more in what you feel than in what you planned. You're no longer anxious about not knowing how things will end, because you've realized your inner fire isn't interested in endings. It's interested in transformations, and you're finally willing to walk through them. You've also come to recognize that every change in your life, even the most uncomfortable one, arrives with a message you're no longer willing to ignore. You've become so sensitive to misalignment that now you can feel when a chapter has ended, even if you can't yet name it. Before, you waited for external signs to let go. Now your inner fire is enough guidance. It speaks to you without words, telling you something has completed its cycle, and with increasing humility, you make room for the new. You've stopped negotiating with stagnation. You know staying in a place where you no longer resonate isn't stability, it's self-abandonment. And though the leap into the unknown still causes vertigo, you now trust your ability to fly. Because every time you've dared to release what no longer belonged to you, Life has shown you something greater, cleaner, more aligned, and that memory sustains you. You've also stopped seeing repetitive cycles as punishment. Now you see them as teachers. You understand that if something returns, it's not so you can hold it the same way, but so you can choose differently. Your inner fire has awakened a consciousness that no longer allows you to repeat what you once normalized, and that gives you power. The power not to react, but to respond. The power not to resist, but to move with the flow without getting lost in it. You've understood that change is not a disruption of your purpose. It's part of its activation. You're not here to do just one thing. You're here to evolve, to transform, to let old versions of yourself die off when they no longer represent you. And your fire knows that. That's why it burns when you stay too long in a place where you no longer grow. That's why it pushes you, even when you're still afraid, not to make you suffer, but to remind you of who you are. And in that silent memory of your soul, you begin to understand. There is no going backward when fire is leading the way. Even what looks like a detour is actually redirecting you. Even what seems like a loss is actually lightening your load. Because now, everything that moves, whether you understand it or not, vibrates in perfect rhythm with the purpose your soul has already set in motion. Sign number 5. Your truth no longer fits in small spaces. You've begun to speak, to express yourself, to reveal parts of you that you once hid in order not to disturb, not to disrupt the peace. But now, you can't hold it back. Not because you're trying to impose anything, but because the silence was consuming you. Your inner fire has started to push your voice outward. And that voice doesn't want to shout. It wants to resonate. You're not seeking attention. You're seeking alignment. And that's why what you used to hide is now shared with a calm strength that changes everything. You also realize that the way you express yourself has evolved. You no longer speak to convince. You speak to liberate. You no longer choose your words out of fear of being too much. You choose them out of respect for yourself. Your voice has stopped being a tool of adaptation and has become a channel for truth. And that truth may not always be comfortable, but it's yours, and that is enough. You begin to see how long you've been holding yourself back, how often you sacrificed your own peace just to maintain someone else's, how much you silenced what needed to be said just to avoid conflict. But now, the fire burning at your center won't let you stay silent where you need to speak your truth, because what isn't expressed gets blocked, and you've decided to unblock yourself. You no longer care about being too intense, too sensitive, too direct, because you've stopped measuring your voice to fit into spaces not meant for your truth. You've realized your energy was never meant to go unnoticed. It was meant to transform. And every time you speak from that fire, you don't impose, you illuminate, you don't attack, you reflect, you don't push, you awaken. Even when the right words don't come, your presence speaks, your gaze, your silence, your frequency. Everything you once repressed now flows with a different rhythm, because your voice is no longer just sound, it's the extension of your soul. And that soul has remembered its purpose, to hold truth, even when it shakes, even when it isn't embraced. And most importantly, you've stopped asking for permission to be yourself, not from the ego, but from authenticity. You no longer wait for a safe space to show yourself. You are that space. You are that sanctuary. Because when you speak from what burns inside, you're not seeking applause. You're affirming that you can no longer dim your fire just to fit into someone else's comfort. You also notice that by allowing yourself to speak from that deep place, something within you comes into order, not because others understand or accept it, but because you finally stop fragmenting yourself. Each time you express what you used to hold back, you don't just free yourself, you integrate. And that integration feels like rest, like expansion, like finally being able to breathe without asking for permission. You've let go of needing ideal circumstances to be yourself, because you now understand that every moment you choose to be a vessel of truth is a sacred act, even if it goes unnoticed. You're no longer speaking from a need to be heard. You're speaking because what you carry inside can no longer stay in shadow. You know that every time you repress your light, something dims within you, and you're no longer willing to allow that. You also realize your voice doesn't need to be perfect. You don't have to know everything, say it flawlessly, or have a polished narrative. You just need to be honest, consistent, present. Fire doesn't demand form, it demands surrender. And you've begun to surrender, with less shame, with less guilt, and with more loyalty to what you truly feel. And it shows, not in volume, but in vibration. Your energy starts to speak for you. Your very presence becomes a message. You no longer strive to explain what others can't resonate with. You simply live it. You no longer argue your truth. You embody it. Because you understand that the real impact doesn't come from what's shouted, but from what's held with soul. By speaking from your fire, you also learn to hold the echo, to accept that there won't always be a response, that not everyone will know what to do with your truth. But instead of shrinking, you remain. Because now you know your purpose is not to please, it is to awaken. And awakening may be uncomfortable, but it always transforms. You are no longer a reflection of what others expect. You are the manifestation of a voice that has been ignited from within. And that voice, even if it trembles, even if it hesitates, even if it's still learning how to speak itself, can no longer be silenced, because your fire holds it now, and that fire will not go out. The sixth sign appears quietly, almost invisibly. You don't force anything, you don't make big moves, and yet everything starts to shift. People begin to walk away without drama, without a fight. Others enter your life for reasons you can't quite explain. Places that once gave you comfort now feel strange and distant. Outwardly, you're doing nothing different, but inside, your energy is no longer the same. Something has ignited, a fire, and that fire is starting to reconfigure your world. You may not notice it at first, or you might even feel confused, but soon, a deeper understanding arrives. This is not chaos. This is alignment. The path is being cleared ahead of your next step. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. And you begin to see that this reorganization of your life is not about loss, but about resonance. There's no need for angry goodbyes, no need to chase explanations. What no longer vibrates with your essence simply dissolves, quietly, without resistance, as if the fire burning within you has begun to expose every false connection, every fear-based pattern, every attachment you once held out of habit or insecurity. You don't have to fight. You don't even have to decide. Life, now aligned with your deeper truth, decides for you. And yes, it can hurt. At first, there's confusion, even grief. But that pain gives way to relief. You stop pretending. You stop forcing yourself to fit into roles and spaces that no longer reflect your soul. You no longer have to hide just to belong. And in that release, peace finds you. Not the shallow peace of comfort zones, but the peace of authenticity. You start to stand taller, speak clearer, act truer. You no longer shrink to fit in. You no longer hand over your energy just to avoid discomfort. You no longer stay quiet just to keep the peace. Because this fire inside of you isn't trying to destroy, it's trying to reveal. And anything built on lies, illusions, or outdated versions of you will melt away, not with violence, but with grace. No pressure, no force, just natural, inevitable transformation. And here's the most beautiful part. As your old world fades, a new one begins to rise. You begin attracting people who don't just like you, they recognize you. People who don't drain your energy, they fuel it. People who don't require you to dim your light, they help you shine it brighter. So if this resonates with you, if you've felt this shift, if you're living this change, know that you're not alone. This is the path of awakening, of alignment, of true power. And if you're walking this path, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. If this message stirred something deep inside you, don't leave without taking a step further. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next message your soul is waiting to hear. This space isn't for everyone. It's for those who are ready to let go of the version they were taught to be and rise into the truth of who they really are. Because this is just the beginning. You're not here by chance. Something within you, something subtle yet powerful, led you to this video in this exact moment. And once you reach the end, you'll understand why. This is not just another coincidence in your life. This is a calling from your inner self, a quiet nudge from your soul that has been guiding you without noise or spectacle. Because transcending your old self is not a loud, dramatic transformation. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand declarations. It's something quiet, almost imperceptible, a silent journey that unfolds inwardly. It's not about becoming someone new with external changes. It's about shedding what never truly belonged to you in the first place. It's about remembering who you have always been at your core. This kind of transformation doesn't shout, it whispers. It feels like waking up one day and realizing you no longer belong to the identity you used to cling to. You no longer resonate with the same spaces, with the same conversations, or even with the same parts of yourself that once defined you. Carl Jung once said that true spiritual growth doesn't come from perfecting your personality. It comes from transcending it, letting go of all that is non-essential, all that was built as armor or illusion, to remember the essence of your soul, that quiet, unwavering truth that has always been within you. And one of the first signs of this shift is that you no longer identify with your past story. What once felt like a central part of your identity now feels distant, like watching an old movie. You can see it, even remember it, but it doesn't define you anymore. There's no longer any need to reject it, nor do you feel a wave of nostalgia for it. You feel calm when you remember, because now you can observe your journey without feeling the urge to explain or justify it. You no longer tell your story from the wound. You don't define yourself by what you suffered or what you achieved. You know it was all part of your path, but you also know with a deep, unshakable certainty that your worth is not measured by any of it. What happened no longer controls who you are or limits what you can become. And in the space once filled with guilt or pride, something new is born. A gentle freedom that allows you to see your past for what it truly is. The past. This emotional distance isn't about detachment. It's about integration. You don't need anyone to understand your pain anymore. You don't seek validation for what you lived. You no longer feel the urge to explain what made you who you are. You simply know. Your silence honors it. And that is enough. You begin to notice that the things that used to trigger you, that once stirred something deep inside, now pass through you without leaving a scar. Words that once pierced you now dissolve in your awareness. Relationships that once kept you anchored to outdated versions of yourself start to lose their grip. Not because you're rejecting them, but because there's nothing left in you for them to hold on to. As you transcend your old self, your emotions stop dictating your reactions, not because you disconnect from your feelings, but because you learn to discern what part of you is responding from the present, and what part is simply repeating familiar patterns. Your inner narrative begins to shift. The thoughts you once repeated for survival no longer play in your mind. You're no longer seeking redemption. You're not punishing yourself for the person you used to be. You simply observe and move forward, as if something within you knows that every chapter before this one was necessary to bring you here. That deep understanding does not come from the intellect. It comes from the soul. And it is in that awareness that your old self begins to dissolve, not because it vanishes, but because you no longer live there. And when you stop inhabiting that old version of yourself, something inside you becomes lighter. You don't forget what you lived. You simply no longer need it as your foundation. Your choices begin to arise from a place that is freer, clearer, more aligned with who you truly are, not with the story you used to tell about yourself. Those self-definitions that once felt so solid, "This is just how I am," or "I can't change," begin to blur. Not because you fought against them, but because they no longer make sense to the person you are becoming. You no longer act out of a need to maintain a firm identity. You've realized your soul doesn't need labels to feel alive. Transcending your old self isn't about destroying it. It's about honoring what it once was and moving forward without dragging along what no longer serves you. You stop clinging to the persona you created to survive. You no longer feel the need to repeat emotional patterns or adjust yourself to fit into spaces you've outgrown. And the gentleness with which you let go, the ease with which you release without resistance, is the clearest sign that you are no longer vibrating from a conditioned self. You are beginning to live from your true self, the self that doesn't need to defend or prove anything, the self that simply is. And then something else happens. Your way of connecting with others begins to shift. And not because you planned it. It happens naturally. You start relating to others from a clearer, more honest, more unburdened place. You no longer seek in someone else what you've learned to give yourself. You don't look for a savior. You don't need to be seen to feel real. Your presence is no longer something you bargain with out of fear of being alone. In the past, your relationships were often built on need, on unspoken agreements rooted in pain, on unconscious emotional trade-offs. But now, there is space. Space to breathe. Space to pause before reacting. Space to observe without absorbing everything. When you transcend, you stop repeating the emotional patterns that once held you captive. Not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer making choices from your wounds. Your sensitivity no longer leads you blindly. Your giving no longer comes from emptiness. It arises from balance. And that changes everything. Your relationships stop being mirrors of what you lack and become reflections of what you already are. You no longer seek conversations to avoid silence or intimacy to escape yourself. You are finally able to share from a place of fullness, not from a sense of lack. And this is the essence of true transformation, when you no longer need to be anything other than what you are, when your past no longer defines you, when your emotions serve as messengers, not masters, when your story becomes a sacred memory instead of a living script. That's when you know you've begun to remember who you truly are. Even if someone doesn't resonate with you, there is no drama, there is no resentment or internal rupture, because your emotional stability no longer relies on someone else's willingness to stay. You now place your peace in someone else's hands. And that shift, that quiet, invisible shift, changes everything. When you begin to embody emotional independence, you discover a version of freedom that is not just liberating, but grounding. You're no longer running away, nor clinging. You're simply present. And that is enough. Your presence, once a background element of who you were, becomes your new language of love. A love that doesn't demand, that doesn't beg to be seen, that doesn't wait for reciprocity to feel real. It's a quieter love, deeper and more genuine. It doesn't scream through promises or perform affection to be validated. It simply is, steady, congruent, and peaceful. Not because it's trying to prove something, but because it doesn't need to. You begin to connect from a place of truth, not from a need to uphold an image or fulfill a role. You no longer invest energy in conversations that don't resonate, nor do you maintain relationships that exist only out of habit or history. Your energy, more refined and attuned, naturally filters out what doesn't align. And even if that process stings, it also brings relief. It brings clarity. Your old self used to choose from urgency, from fear of being left behind, from desperation to be accepted at any cost. But now, you no longer choose that way, because you've made peace with your own silence. You've learned to sit with it, to welcome it like an old friend. You know that the company of someone who doesn't truly connect with you can feel lonelier than your own solitude. So, you stay with yourself, even if that means walking away from what you once thought was love. You stop confusing intensity with truth and drama with depth. You begin to recognize that what brings peace is what truly has roots, and what needs constant tension to survive is often just a mask for disconnection. You no longer try to force understanding. You don't need to convince anyone of your growth, or justify why you can no longer remain in spaces that stifle your soul. Your vibration, the energy you emit simply by being true to yourself, begins to speak louder than any words. And without meaning to, it triggers reactions in those who haven't yet crossed their own thresholds. Some will drift away. Others will draw near, but from a different place. From honesty, not from need. And you will be at peace with both, because your center is no longer defined by your relationships. Now your center defines your relationships. In this new order, whatever stays, does so because it truly resonates, not because it is being forced to. This profound change in how you relate to others quietly reshapes your entire reality. What once felt essential now gently dissolves. And this is not rejection, it's clarity. Clarity born from having explored your own darkness so thoroughly that you no longer need to project it onto others. Your old self searched for mirrors. People who would confirm your worth, who would fill your empty spaces with half-presences and temporary comforts. But you are no longer available for that kind of bond. You've come to understand that a true connection doesn't consume you. It expands you. It doesn't ask you to betray your essence. It invites you to live it more fully. And when you begin to connect from this renewed energy, everything changes. Connections become subtler, more honest, lighter. The strength of a bond no longer lies in how loud or intense it is, but in its frequency, in that silent space where two souls can simply exist together, without explanation, without rescue, without clinging. In this new state, you learn to set boundaries, not from fear, but from love, self-love. And these boundaries don't divide. They bring order. They organize your energy, your time, your internal space. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to maintain what isn't growing with you. You don't stay out of fear of losing the little that's left. You've shifted into another vibration, one that doesn't apologize for evolving. You no longer feel the need to ask forgiveness for choosing your truth. And that, in itself, is proof that your old self is no longer the one guiding your relationships. Now, it's your soul. And your soul only chooses what nourishes, what uplifts, what reminds you of who you truly are. From this place, you begin to understand the true purpose of companionship, not to complete you, but to share who you've already become. You no longer seek shelter in others because you have become your own safe space. And this energetic self-sufficiency doesn't mean isolation. It means soul-level maturity. You stop carrying emotions that don't belong to you. You stop absorbing what others refuse to transform. You no longer fall into the trap of healing those who haven't chosen healing for themselves. You no longer dissolve in patterns where you once tried to be enough by becoming less of yourself. Because now, real love is not disguised sacrifice. It is presence without pressure, connection without chains. And it's within that clean, quiet connection that the most powerful things begin to unfold. You become a mirror of transformation for others, not because you intend to lead or guide them, but simply because your vibration reaches them. Your mere presence in a state of coherence starts to reveal the truths others have long avoided within themselves. Some will be thankful for this, while others may resist it. But either way, you remain at peace, because your connection is no longer born from duty or obligation. It's rooted in the freedom of being authentically yourself. And it's in that space where you begin to understand something profound. The deepest, most meaningful bonds are not those that promise the most, but those that honor each other's evolution. That level of connection can only arise once you've walked through your own personal transformation. You've faced your old self, embraced it, and lovingly released it, not out of rejection, but with understanding. You finally see that your past version wasn't wrong or broken. It was simply trying to protect you the only way it knew how. But now, that protection is no longer necessary. You no longer need to hide behind a character or wear a mask just to feel worthy of love. You've stopped striving to be accepted. Now, you simply are. And that is enough. Without effort, without seeking approval, your essence begins to radiate more purely than ever before. And in that purity, you discover a new kind of intimacy. It's not about sharing every wound or narrating your journey in detail. It's about allowing yourself to be seen as you are, right now, without decoration, without pretense. You no longer carry the weight of old disguises. It no longer offends you to be misunderstood. It doesn't wound you like before, to be overlooked or left behind. That's because the source of your value no longer resides in the eyes of others. It lives within the relationship you've built with yourself. A relationship that was born out of silence, out of lonely nights, where you chose not to fall back into old patterns, out of days when you decided to hold yourself together even when nothing else was holding you. From that deep root, your old self gently steps away, not because you banish it, but because it no longer resonates with your current frequency. You can look back and honor that version of you as part of your story, recognizing that it did the best it could with what it knew, with what it had, and with what it believed was necessary to survive. But you're no longer surviving. You're creating. And in this state of conscious creation, there's no room left for the rigid structures of the past. Now there is space for softness, for subtlety, for that which vibrates without needing to shout. Your soul no longer needs to impress, defend, or prove its light. It simply inhabits it. And from that space, every relationship that remains or enters your life becomes a reflection of this new state of being. A state where love no longer feels like a burden, but a support that doesn't invade. Where sharing doesn't stem from lack, but from fullness. Where choosing someone or something isn't about clinging, but about honoring what aligns with who you are now. Your vision of life shifts in a way that can't be undone. You stop perceiving things the way you used to. What once looked unfair to you now reveals itself as part of a bigger design. What you once labeled as mistakes are now recognized as crucial moments of growth and transformation. You no longer speak to yourself as a victim. Your consciousness has expanded enough to recognize that even the most painful moments carried a greater purpose beyond the suffering. Transcending your old self doesn't just mean healing your wounds. It means seeing from a higher vantage point. Not because it makes you feel better, but because your soul can no longer look through the same lens. You've elevated internally, and that inner elevation allows you to perceive what once felt like chaos as hidden order, as silent teachings, as coded messages waiting to be understood. Even your relationship with time begins to shift. You no longer live in a constant state of waiting. You don't chase after what slips away, nor do you insist that everything must happen now. You start to live in harmony with the natural rhythm of your soul, a rhythm that isn't rushed by external pressures, but guided by inner maturity. In this rhythm, everything flows differently. Your priorities reorganize. What once seemed so important now fades, and the things you once overlooked now feel sacred. You begin to value silence. You revere the pause. You trust the process, even when you don't understand every step. You no longer need guarantees to move forward. You just need to feel aligned. And that's enough. Because now, you know the soul doesn't need to understand everything to keep going. It just needs to be in tune with what resonates as truth. This alignment with your truth becomes your compass. You stop making decisions from fear of making mistakes. You stop living from the urgency of fulfilling other people's expectations. Your choices are no longer reactions to a painful past. They're quiet acts of honoring your present. And that simple but powerful shift changes everything about how you experience life. You no longer force meaning out of every situation. You've learned that true understanding often arrives only after you've let go. And with that level of energetic maturity, you stop trying to control everything. You release the need to demand answers from life in the moment. You begin to live with more softness. And that softness doesn't mean weakness or passivity. It means power, refined and silent. Your strength becomes something inward and unwavering. You no longer feel compelled to showcase your process or prove your transformation to anyone. Your most honest silence speaks more than words ever could. And that changes how you walk through the world. You begin to move through your days with more awareness. The smallest moments, the brief pauses, the subtle gestures, begin to feel meaningful. You're no longer chasing the next accomplishment, nor measuring your growth by what's visible to others. Now, you measure it by what you feel when you wake up in the morning, by the calm you sense when you're alone, by the peace that hums inside you, even when everything around you is moving. Transcending the old self means stepping beyond the limited identity you once clung to, living from a higher plane of perception without ever needing to leave your body. It's inhabiting a new frequency, a different state of being, without escaping from the world you know. It is no longer about reacting to what life throws at you, but about consciously choosing how you want to experience your reality. This conscious choice becomes the seed of transformation. It shifts the way you relate to every single part of your existence. What used to feel like a burden can now become an opportunity to be fully present. What once drained you now dissolves quietly and gently, without resistance, without resentment. And though this transformation may not be immediately visible to others, it is deep, enduring, and powerful. Because now you no longer rely on your circumstances to feel peace. Your inner peace is no longer dependent on whether things go your way or not. It flows from how faithfully you are living in alignment with your true self. And that inner fidelity, it's non-negotiable. It becomes your anchor, your center, your guiding truth. The old self measured its worth through goals achieved, through the approval of others, through applause and external validation. But you're no longer chasing after those illusions. You've discovered that true fulfillment doesn't come with noise. It reveals itself quietly, in the rhythm of your breath, in the way you choose your words, in the calm dignity with which you walk away from anything that no longer nourishes your soul, without causing harm or conflict. You begin to view challenges differently. They're no longer punishments or obstacles meant to break you. They are thresholds, gateways that your soul must pass through in order to awaken the dormant parts of you. You stop running from them. You face them with the inner knowing that they're not here to destroy you, but to unveil you. And that shift changes your energy at the most fundamental level. Your vibration no longer emits fear or doubt. It radiates truth, a truth that needs no defense, that speaks for itself in your eyes, your presence, your stillness. And it is in that moment of inner clarity that you realize the most significant change did not happen outside of you. It happened within you. The deepest transformation was never about rearranging your environment. It was about seeing life through the lens of your awakened soul, no longer through the filter of a self that needed fixing, proving, or pleasing. From that place of awakening, the ordinary becomes sacred, not because the world has changed, but because your perception is no longer tinted by lack or fear. Your gaze softens, it expands, it becomes filled with gratitude. You no longer need divine signs to believe, nor absolute certainty to move forward. You start walking with a slower inner rhythm, not because you've slowed down externally, but because you're no longer chasing things that were never meant for you. You grant yourself the freedom to choose differently, even if no one understands. You give yourself permission to not have all the answers, to not be in control, to leave space for the mystery to unfold itself, because you now trust that life is working with you, not against you. And in that sacred space, everything begins to align, not because you're doing more, but because you're resisting less. Your vibration becomes a magnet, attracting only what resonates with who you've become. You no longer need to force, to hold on, or to push. What is meant for you stays. What isn't simply fades away, peacefully and without drama. Even the difficulties that show up begin to take on a new shape. They don't vanish, but they no longer shatter you like they once did, because you're not approaching them from the same wounded version of yourself. You now face them with a depth that doesn't need immediate answers, but seeks true understanding, with a maturity that doesn't aim to win, but to stay in alignment. You meet life not with urgency, but with presence. You stop striving to be someone and start embodying who you truly are. And in that embodiment, everything changes. Not suddenly, not loudly, but completely. And that, though no one else may see it, changes absolutely everything. Because when your energy aligns with your truth, your reality begins to respond in kind. No chaos, no struggle, just synchronicity, just clarity, just that quiet whisper within you that speaks without words, that reminds you effortlessly of what you've always known. You're no longer who you used to be. You've transcended. And that transcendence doesn't announce itself. It is embodied, felt in silence, recognized only by the depth of your presence. There's no exact moment when it all clicks, no marked point of arrival. One day, you simply notice you don't react the same way. The things that used to hurt you now barely reach you. You no longer move through life driven by the urgency that once dictated your inner world. You've changed, not on the surface, but at the root. And that kind of change runs so deep, it doesn't need a name to be real. You feel it in how you carry yourself, in how you choose peace over performance. It shows in your ability to sit in silence without anxiety, to welcome uncertainty without losing your center, to live from what's essential without dressing it up. Your energy no longer scatters in 1,000 directions. It consolidates, it aligns, it becomes a current, one that moves not from pressure or expectation, but from a source within you that has no name and needs no explanation. This source, this guidance, comes from a connection to something deeper than your identity, your labels, your story. You no longer exist to maintain an image. You exist to express an essence. That essence that has always been with you, waiting patiently while you were busy chasing, proving, surviving, waiting for you to stop orbiting the same distractions. And you did. You let go. You chose differently. You walked forward. And without even realizing it, you transcended, not as an achievement, but as a natural outcome of choosing honesty over habit, of staying true to yourself when silence was harder than noise, of standing by your soul when turning back would have been easier. Now, that old version of you is no longer in control, and in its place stands someone real, someone calmer, someone more you than you've ever been. From this place of authenticity, a new chapter begins, not one where you react, but one where you respond with presence. You no longer chase approval because you've remembered your own worth simply by existing. You no longer seek belonging because your soul has remembered its eternal home was always within you. Life is no longer a race. It becomes a sacred unfolding, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped resisting what isn't. You welcome each moment, not with resignation, but with a peace that comes from reconciliation with the now. Your days are no longer a cycle of repetition. They become a living expression of your new frequency. Each word you speak, each gaze you offer, each step you take, carries the imprint of someone who has chosen to live from their center. And that imprint, though invisible, leaves an undeniable impact. Because a soul that has transcended its former self doesn't need to move mountains to transform the world. Its very presence is healing. It's a silent medicine, a reminder that living in alignment is not only possible, it is powerful. It shows others that healing is not a myth, that letting go doesn't mean forgetting, that becoming doesn't mean rejecting who you were. It means honoring the journey, understanding that every step prepared you for this one, this moment, this now. And now that you're here, your vibration speaks for you, and the world responds. If you felt this message resonate somewhere deep inside you, it's not a coincidence. Your soul already knew. It was simply waiting for you to remember yourself. Because transcending the old self is not an ending, it is a beginning. A beginning where you finally return to yourself fully, without fear, without masks, without weight. Carl Jung once said that enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. And in those few words lies a truth that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Because facing your darkness, acknowledging your shadow, is one of the most terrifying and liberating experiences a human being can endure. It's not a poetic metaphor. It's a raw, sometimes painful process of peeling back the layers of who you thought you were, only to meet the parts of yourself you tried so hard to ignore, suppress, or deny. And yet, if you're listening to this now, it's because something inside you has already shifted. You've crossed that invisible threshold where you no longer fear the dark corners of your mind. You've chosen to stop running. You've dared to look inward, to confront the wounds, the memories, the patterns, and the emotions that once held power over you. That is not a small step. That is the beginning of true transformation. You see, the shadow isn't something to be destroyed or erased. It's not your enemy. It is a part of you that has been waiting, often in silence, for your acceptance, for your love. Making the darkness conscious means learning to see it, to name it, and ultimately to integrate it. And when you do that, something incredible happens. The very parts of you that once felt broken become the source of your deepest wisdom. The pain becomes a teacher. The fear becomes a compass. The chaos, a doorway to clarity. You've walked that path. You've taken your shadow by the hand and said, I see you. I know you're there, and I'm ready to listen. That takes courage. That takes strength. And it's a journey most people avoid their entire lives. But you didn't. You made your shadow a bridge instead of a burden. And now, you move through the world from a place that feels more grounded, more truthful, more real. And if in some way this space has been a companion for you on that journey, if the words you found here have echoed something ancient and familiar within your soul, then know this: you're not walking alone. You're part of something much greater, something that transcends language and time. It's a collective awakening, a shared remembering. There are others, just like you, stepping out of illusion and into authenticity, choosing presence over perfection, choosing wholeness over avoidance. So if your heart feels called to keep exploring, to keep shedding the false and embracing the true, then walk with us. Keep going, because every step you take inward echoes outward. Every time you choose truth over comfort, darkness over denial, light is born, not imagined, not forced, but naturally revealed. You are not who you were, and you are not alone. And if these words have stirred something within you, if you feel that this journey resonates with the quiet truth you carry deep inside, then I invite you to stay close. This space was created for souls like yours, for those who are ready to walk a different path, one of depth, presence, and inner clarity. So, if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a movement of consciousness. Because each video, each reflection, each moment we share here is meant to support your journey and remind you of who you truly are beneath all the noise. Subscribe, and let's keep walking this path together.